Good morning and Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Before starting anything, I would like to call Mr. Inamullah to come on stage and recite the verses from Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today for the 34th Conference and Annual General Meeting by Pakistan Society of Development Economics. I, Fazal Husain, on behalf of PSDE and PIDE, welcome our distinguished guests and all of you here. I would request Minister, please to allow us to open the conference. Thank you. I would like to introduce our guests with you, Mr. Makhdum Khusro Bakhtyar. He's Minister Planning and Development Reforms Commission. He is also Patron of the Pakistan Society of Development Economics and Chancellor Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He has held the seats of Punjab Assembly and National Assemblies, and he held the portfolio of Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Bakhtyar graduated from the University of Punjab in 1990 and received an LLB degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science and a Bar at Law degree from Lincoln's Inn University, United Kingdom. We have with us Secretary Planning, Mr. Fazal Husain, who is one of the very active secretaries. He is also Project Director, CPAC. He is focusing on policy making of the country and formation of the Public Development Program. He has Public Policy and Finance degree from USA and also has a degree in Development Economics from London School of Economics. We have Dr. Asad Zaman, who is the President of Pakistan Society of Development Economics and Vice Chancellor of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He is a known name in scholarly world and a leading economist. He is serving as member of Economic Advisory Committee of Prime Minister of Pakistan. He also serves as member of Monetary Policy Committee, State Bank of Pakistan, and Director PSLM and HIES Surveys. Dr. Zaman earned his PhD from Stanford in economics. Before joining PIDE, he has taught at numerous top-ranked institutions: Lahore University of Management Science, Bilkin University, Johns Hopkins University, Columbia University, University of Pennsylvania, to name a few. Dr. Zaman has an excellent command over the history of social and economic thought and historical development of Western political thoughts. He refutes the Western methodology of social sciences with undeniable evidences and considers that Islamic heritage in social sciences is far better than Western counterpart. We have Dr. Fazal Husain, who is Secretary, Pakistan Society of Development Economics for year 2018 and also Dean of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He completed his PhD from Catholic University of America. He started his career in January 1984 at PIDE and currently serving as Joint Director and Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences. I would like to welcome you all. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for National Anthem now. Pakistan Society of Development economists aim to look into the major economic issues of the world in general and country in particular, and tries its best to provide solutions of those issues by gathering intellectuals, philosophers, and policymakers every year. This year's theme is Pakistan Economy, the Way Forward. Itself shows that after talking about problems and their solutions, what is the way forward to go and achieve the level of progress? When I'm standing here today to commence this ceremony, I want to remind all, it has taken efforts and dedication of a whole year by Team PSDE. With this note, I would request Dr. Fazal Husain to present his secretary report.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Khusro Bakhtyar, Deputy Chairman, Planning Commission and Patron PSDE, Professor Asad Zaman, VC PIDE and President PSDE, Mr. Hassan Zafar, Secretary Planning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 34th Annual General Meeting and Conference of the Pakistan Society of Development Economists. I would especially like to welcome and thank our chief guest, who has very kindly spared time from his busy engagements to grace this occasion. I welcome our distinguished speakers, panelists, discussants, and presenters who have traveled from abroad and from within Pakistan to participate in the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pakistan Society of Development Economists was formed in 1982 for the provision of an institutional forum for exchange of ideas in research and economic development. Since its inception, it has widely contributed to create linkages between academicians and policymakers, along with the dissemination of valuable research findings among scholars, public officials, and policymakers dealing with social and economic issues. The Society has on its register eminent economists, including Nobel laureates, academicians, prominent researchers, and students working in different continents of the world. PSD has the honor to be headed by top economists throughout history. Professor Sayyid Nawab Haidar Naqvi was the founding president of PSDE, and since then the Society has the honor to be headed by Dr. Sarfraz Khan Qureshi, Dr. A.R. Kamal, Dr. Nadeemul Haq, Dr. Rashid Amjad, and at present by Professor Asad Zaman. The annual conference is a regular feature of the Pakistan Society of Development Economists since its inception. This grand event offers an important platform to professional economists, development scientists, research scholars, policymakers, businessmen, and students to present their most relevant research findings and get on-the-spot feedback, along with an exchange of ideas on the pressing economic and social issues facing the world in general and Pakistan in particular. The conference has very rich history. Starting from 1984 and until today, the Society has organized 33 conferences labeled as Annual General Meeting and Conference of PSDE. The PSD has the honor to host the lectures of eminent scholars, including Nobel laureates like Lawrence Klein, Robert Mendel. The conference has become most prestigious and become biggest annual gathering of economists and development scientists in Pakistan. The conference programs include distinguished lectures, panel sessions, and technical sessions. The regular series of distinguished lectures include 3 lectures, that is Dr. Mehboob Haq Memorial Lecture, Allama Iqbal Lecture, and Quaid-e-Azam Lecture. The themes for the annual general meeting and conferences are carefully chosen to match with the need of time and provide a broad spectrum for growth. This year's themes of the event is Pakistan Economy, the Way Forward, with 10 sub-themes. Pakistan economy is facing many economic and development changes, and the present government is struggling hard to cope with these challenges. These challenges include trade and current account deficits, climate change, water security, regional connectivity, and health issues. This year's conference of PSD contains dedicated, distinguished lectures and panel sessions revolving around these current policy issues. World leading professionals are invited to take part in the debate. This year's distinguished guests include Dr. Adil Najam, the lead author of the report of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the report that won 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. For Allama Iqbal lecture, we have Pakistan's leading economist, Professor Sayyid Nawab Haidar Naqvi, HEC Distinguished National Professor and Associate Faculty of Global Issues Initiatives, Virginia Tech University. He'll be talking about defining movements and ideas in economics. For the Qaid-e-Azam lecture, we have Dr. Tariq Banoori, who is the current chairman of Higher Education Commission and world-renowned environmental scientist and economist. He'll be talking about an export promotion strategy for the knowledge economy. We have also arranged 2 special invited lectures. One lecture will be given by Dr. Devin Arnold, President Asia Foundation. He'll talk on regional connectivity, prospects and challenges for Pakistan. The second one will be delivered by Professor Frank Chalupka. He's the professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He will talk on the economics of addiction. In addition to the distinguished invited lectures, we have arranged 6 panel discussions covering the issues related to management of the economy, exports, agriculture, environment, and regional connectivity. Considering the current government's special focus on housing and poverty, we have arranged a panel session on governance, housing, and poverty. We have invited leading experts from diverse professional backgrounds as our panelists and discussants and hope that their knowledge and experience will greatly enrich the deliberations of the conference. Following our traditions, I am pleased to report that we have invited faculty and students from universities of Pakistan. Their participation in the conference will not only enhance their understanding of economic and social issues, but also provide them an opportunity to interact with leading scholars in the professionals. I would like to commend the efforts of my core team and auxiliary committees in planning and organizing the conference. In particular, Dr. Talat Anwar, Dr. Nadeem Ahmed, Dr. Atikur Rahman, Dr. Saud Ahmed, Dr. Abdul Jalil, Dr. Hassan Rasool, Mr. Azizullah, and other dedicated members. They have really worked hard to assemble together leading academics and policymakers on one platform. I would also acknowledge the support of our conference organizing partners who have helped us in terms of both material logistics and human resources. Finally, I am also grateful for the efforts and supports provided to us by the Planning Commission of Pakistan to realize our objective of the successful and fruitful conference. My special thanks go out to all the staff of PIDE for their dedicated efforts in organizing the conference. I am hopeful, inshallah, that the 3 days conference will evaluate the prospects of the economy and suggest the viable solutions and the way forward, which would be helpful in setting policy directions to achieve a higher growth trajectory in terms of economic as well as economic development in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fazal. To see how relevant the topic of Pakistan Society of Development Economists, the Pakistan economy, the way forward is, for that I would request President, Pakistan Society of Development Economists, Dr. Asad Zaman, to give his presidential address on the topic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'd like to welcome you all to this first meeting and especially thank Minister Saab and all the other distinguished guests for coming and making this a success event. And what I will talk about is an aspect of development which is not very often discussed for reasons that I will also explain. Right. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk about the hidden dimensions, the inner dimensions of development, the human development as it is called. And so basically I frame it within the context of Islamic economics. So first we must start by acknowledging that wrong theories have had enormous cost. Some of these are obvious, but much more is hidden, like the glacier, of which only 10% shows. The cost of the wrong theories which we are using to guide the development process has been incalculable. The global financial crisis is an obvious one. Increasing massive inequality is visible. There are 50 people who own half the planetary wealth, while billions of people are hungry. There is a looming environmental disaster. People are saying that the planet will not be habitable by human beings by 2050 unless we change course. More than half of the species in existence for the past millennia have been wiped out recently due to human activities. Oceans have been polluted, atmosphere has been polluted, jungles are destroyed, polar ice caps have melted, coral reefs. So it's really destruction on a mass scale, and there's no sign of slowdown. So there is an alternative paradigm. There's another way to think about what development is, and that is the Islamic paradigm. About 1450 years ago, the message of Islam created a revolution. Ignorant and backwards Arabs launched a civilization which enlightened the world for 1,000 years. One thing that is not mentioned in conventional histories, it seems that the European Enlightenment was a spontaneous event, which it was not. Actually, it was the Islamic Spain, which the reconquest of gave Europe access to millions of books in the libraries of the Muslims, and that is what launched the enlightenment of the Europe, which the effects of which we are seeing today. So even the light that was launched in 1450 years ago is still enlightening the world. So what is the secret of this revolution, and can it be replicated today? This is the question that. So the truth is that Islam, it is said, it was prophesied that Islam came as a stranger and will become a stranger. And colonization of the globe took place, and one thing that is not well understood is that colonization is not just physical, but it is mental. So colonization is primarily a conquest of knowledge, of ways of looking at the world. So the training system devised by Macaulay eliminated the indigenous culture and substituted by ways of thinking that belong to an alien culture. So the effects of this has been shown by Tariq Rahman in his recent book, Denizens of Alien Worlds, which shows that basically the elite class of Pakistan lives in an entirely different world from the masses. So while political freedom of some sort has been achieved, minds are still chained by the trappings of colonial thought. So one of the main things that I have found as a teacher is that the students don't have the confidence to create new ideas because they feel that we are far behind. And so the antidote to this is that we look at the social science that we are teaching and we consider it as absurd. I mean, this is not something that is to be taken seriously. We just laugh at it rather than engage with it. So, for example, we teach in our courses that the purpose of life is to make money. Really, one shouldn't even engage with this idea. It's just ridiculous. Similarly, the idea that microeconomics teaches that human behavior is predictable, robotic, mathematical, it can be calculated by formulas. This is just something to laugh at. It's not something to debate or discuss. We all know that my actions cannot be described by any formula. Similarly, economic theory as a whole teaches what I would refer to as the Coca-Cola theory of happiness, that the more you eat and drink, the more and the object of life is to maximize the pleasure we get out of consumption. Come on, that's all we need to say. selfishness and cutthroat competition. This is the way to organize an economic society for efficiency. Ridiculous. Now, the prisoner's dilemma is a big puzzle for economists. If everybody cooperates, everybody is better off. But if people betray the social contract and look for their own advantage, then everybody is made worse off. Now, this is a puzzle? This is not a puzzle. I mean, this is what life is all about, that we cooperate socially for the mutual benefit. The idea that we should betray others and look to our personal advantage at the cost of group, this is just ridiculous. And to think that this is rational behavior, that's even more irrational. Similarly, there's this ultimatum game which continues to puzzle economists. If I give some person some money and ask him to share it with others or to keep it all himself, we find that human beings share, even though maximization would involve their keeping it all for themselves. But this is how societies work. If everybody was selfish, society wouldn't function. So there is a serious issue on which I have written longer papers, but here I will just very briefly pass by it. Why is actually the economic theory that we have is very, very seriously deficient? Why is that so? There is a whole huge, long and complicated history. Basically, in Europe, there was Protestant revolution, the Reformation, and there were violent and vicious and very, very cruel and ruthless struggles between different religious groups in Europe, which soured the Europeans on the concept of religion itself. And there was a loss of faith. And loss of faith is always a traumatic event. And so one of the consequences of this trauma was that knowledge was redefined to exclude the heart and the soul. So Descartes, who is considered the father of Western philosophy, he said, "I think, therefore I am." Now this is an enormously significant statement. One should reflect on what this means. If I think about my own existence, then I am aware of the tingling sensation on my skin, my heart is beating, I am breathing. All of this is to be excluded as evidence because we no longer trust our experience, because this is where religious impulse comes from. It comes from the heart. It comes from the feeling of awe in front of God. These feelings have to be excluded from knowledge because they misled us. They made us believe in a God who isn't there. So now I'm not going to trust my heart. I'm not going to trust my soul. I'm not going to trust my experience. I'm only going to trust the brain. So the model of the human beings that we see is the brain floating in a vat. The only thing that counts as evidence is my thought. So I think, therefore I am. Not I feel, therefore I am. This idea continues to haunt Western intellectual tradition, but I won't go through that because that's not. So actually, if we come to the Quran, the heart is clearly described as a sense organ, that we created for you the eyes and the ears and the heart. And that it is not the eyes which become blind, it is the hearts that are blind. So in order to sense the world, we have to open our hearts to it. Now, the entire edifice of contemporary Western thought rejects the idea that the heart is a sense organ. And of course, the soul doesn't exist because it's not a material. This leads to absurd models of human beings, human behavior. Because if you take the heart out of the picture, how can you understand human beings? Human beings consist of the heart, the soul, and the mind. Actually, Islamic philosopher has said that there are 3 different dimensions. The heart is the source of feelings. It feels guilt, pain, shame, anger. The soul is the source of desires, and the brain is the source of thought, and these 3 have to be held in balance. An imbalanced personality can be led by his desires, or they can be led by their heart, or they can be led by the brain. Now the intellectual tradition of the West is solely brain and no heart and no soul. So this leads to a complete ignorance about the sources of human welfare. What makes people happy? Is it just eating and drinking? No. Actually, if you study happiness, you find that humans are social. It is actually loving, being loved. These are the things which people enjoy a lot more than Coca-Cola. So, the Easterlin paradox is that Richard Easterlin, my colleague at UPenn, studied the process of economic growth and does it lead to improved happiness? And he came to the surprising conclusion that it does not. He looked at many kinds of global evidence. Are the rich nations happier than the poorer nations? No. Are the nations which have quintupled or made their standard of living increased by 10 times, have they become happier as a result? No. So all of this led to the Eastern paradox. Now what I would like to think of, what I would like to discuss is that actually the idea that this is a paradox is itself a paradox, that we should know. If we look at our own hearts, we will see that money can't buy happiness. And this used to be well known to human beings before hegemonic culture, which makes the pursuit of money the object of our lives, dominated our thoughts. And now people are in doubt that maybe money can make me happy. So even this has affected all fields of knowledge, even behavioral psychology. One would think that the psychologist would know more about the feelings and the hearts and the souls of man, but it is not true. They only focus on external observable behavior. So the possibility that human beings can change, the hearts can change, this has been ignored. So throughout history, the drivers of change have been inner and spiritual. If you look at the greatest developmental episode in the history of mankind, the advent of Islam, this was driven purely by internal change. Human beings changed and then they changed the world. People who were killing each other for small things and burying their own daughters alive, they became people who fed others while remaining hungry. Throughout, people who have studied the rise of civilizations have said that they have originated in a spiritual change which created community, unity, and it united people for a common purpose. And this has been the driver of change throughout. So Max Weber wrote The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, and he described that the engine of capitalist growth was the Protestant ethic. And how was that? Well, for long and reasons which I will abbreviate here, Protestants came to believe that working hard and earning money was a sign of favor of God. So they started earning money and working hard without actually, while living an austere lifestyle. So this is a paradox, a contradiction. If you want austerity, you don't need to earn money. But they did both of these things, and that was the engine of growth. Similarly, many people who were farsighted in the 60s, they predicted the rise of China and East Asia because they said that these people have the Confucian ethic, and that's will drive honest bureaucracy, and that will be the driver of growth. So throughout history, the drivers of change have been internal. It's the hearts of men which change. So this is also written in the Quran that Allah Ta'ala does not change the condition of people until they strive to change themselves. So how do we create change? What the question we are facing is, how do we create change in Pakistan? What is the way forward? So basically there are 4 dimensions that I would like to point out, one is that you have to have the normative. What is the ideal? What is the target that we are aiming for? Then there is a positive dimension, which is a description of where we are currently, a realistic description which looks at what we are. Then there's the transformative dimension. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And then there is the evaluative dimension, that how do we judge whether we are making progress or not? This is very important. In this, Islam is very different from economics in that it is process-oriented and not consequential. So the evaluative dimension in Western economics is, have we got more goods? But in Islam, it is, are we making the right struggle? So it's how you play the game, not whether you win or lose. That's the process orientation. So if we look at the Islamic concepts, there is Homo Islamicus, which is an ideal personality type. In economics, we have Homo economicus, which is everybody knows. In Islamic concepts, we have heart is the battleground between good and evil, and we are constantly faced with the choice. In economics, we are robots. We follow one principle of utility maximization. Every human being has immense potential to achieve excellence, and basically life is about realizing this capability that is hidden within us, and this occurs through spiritual progress. But in economics, human beings are forever stuck in the bottom stage of spiritual development. They are like children who are motivated purely by pleasure and pain, and they never grow up. So the fundamental problem of economics is considered to be scarcity, not having enough goods. Again, this is pretty childish. True richness is contentment of the heart, as our Prophet said. Scarcity is a way of thinking, not an objective reality. If you give a man a valley of gold, he will want another, as it is said. And there's a Harvard survey of 4,000 millionaires, which showed that 75% of them feel financially insecure. They don't have enough money. So obviously, earning money is not the cure to feeling secure financially or to ending scarcity. So instead of that, we teach abundance thinking. Think of whatever you have as being enough, and then you will be generous. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ showed us in his life. He didn't have enough to eat for most days, but whenever people asked him, he gave them, and he was known as the most generous of the people. And happiness studies, which have a whole field of study has emerged since Easterlin's paradox, which shows that people can be happy in situations which we would think as being incredibly in misery, having disease and having handicaps. It's a question of attuning your heart. So it is not things which buy happiness, it's the attitude with which we face the world. Basically, there are two things which govern. There's the comfort level, how much you, and people can, that comfort level changes. And then there's aspirations. If people want things, that makes them unhappy. If they set their aspiration levels to be content with what they have, they are happy with what they have. So, Easterlin's paradox has dramatic implication for the practical conduct of economic policy. If it is true that all this growth that we are pursuing doesn't increase happiness, then maybe we should not pursue growth. In fact, the industrial society is driven by overproduction. People produce and produce and produce because that's the internal dynamic of capitalism. You have to grow. And so when a lot is produced, then you have to make people buy these things. And the way to make people buy these things is to make them feel unhappy with what they have. And this is done on a massive scale. So it's like a drug addiction. I mean, you consume some good and it makes you temporarily happy, but then you get addicted to this level of comfort like air conditioners. And now you can't be happy without, and so you have to work hard to earn money to support this habit. And basically, as since no particular standard of living will make you happy because it becomes the new normal, you keep pursuing higher and higher levels of growth without actually ever achieving. It's a rat race. So the solution to that is to adopt a simple style of living and spread that, because your high standards of living also create negative externalities. Once somebody is driving big cars, other people want to do that too, and that makes them unhappy. Today, the ecological catastrophe that threatens is because people are living lifestyles which are far beyond the capacity of the planet to sustain. And so environmentalists and ecologists are saying that we need to do degrowth. We need to reverse the growth process, and we need to settle for simpler lifestyles so that everybody can enjoy. And actually, there are enough resources already to feed, clothe, house, educate, take care of health needs of everybody on the planet. And we have had that for a century at least. But this greed for always more, which never is satiated, this is what's driving the planet to destruction. So how will we how will we achieve simplicity? Again, the change has to come from our hearts, not from the external environment. So the Quran provides us with a strategy. It says that you will never attain the good unless you spend in the way of Allah from what you love. So what is needed is that we need to cleanse our hearts of the love of materials and comforts. And how do we do that? Well, the Quran says, give away the things that you love the most, and that will reduce your love of material things, and it will enable you to live simply. One of the crucial things is to distinguish between needs and wants. What are the things that I need to live? Those are very important, and the Quran strongly encourages us to acquire a comfort level. This is very different from the Christianity which favors monasticism. Give away the world and don't enjoy life. And so the Quran says, be comfortable, enjoy, wear nice clothes, but don't waste. So it's very simple. If you need something, if it makes you happy, do it, but don't do wasteful consumption. That is haram, that's prohibited. And it's actually massive amount of waste that's causing the scarcity that we see. Because economic theory says that consumers are sovereign. We don't distinguish between needs and wants, and our job is to fulfill all wants. This is ridiculous. We fulfill genuine wants, for sure. If somebody wants food, it's our job to make sure that he gets it. But if somebody wants to enjoy sunset in the island of Bali, that's not something it's our job to fulfill. So economists are doing the wrong job. Once you focus on making the job of economists to fulfill the basic needs of everyone, this is a job that can be done. There is no scarcity which is in the way. Rather, the problem is greed and possessiveness and inequality. These are the main problems of economics. So, what are the steps that we need to take? The first step was to unite the hearts. That's how the state of Medina was created. There was lots of tribal rivalries. Those were strongly discouraged. And in fact, the uniting of the hearts in love, this was the great achievement of Islam. Today, the hybrid warfare that has been invented as a strategy in the past, see, after the Vietnam War, the Americans came to the realization that the war was lost not in the battlefield, but in the TV sets in the home. So from then on, they have been working on this concept of hybrid warfare, which means that you attack the nation not by a military, but on all its fault lines. So in Pakistan, we have a huge number of fault lines. We have the Shia-Sunni split, we have the Barelvi-Deobandi split, we have the secular people and the religious people, we have provincial splits, we have tribals, we have linguistic splits, and all of these are actually being exploited specifically and deliberately to create disunity. So it's again a question of the heart. We can clean our hearts of all of this petty things which separate us, and realize that the bonds of humanity that we share are much stronger than anything which separates us, whether it's tribe or religion or wealth. All of these divisors are very small in relation to the common bonds that I am a human being and you are a human being. That automatically means that we share a huge number of things. And it doesn't matter if we speak different languages. I know that without knowing anything about I know that your heart feels compassion for others, because this is how human beings are built. So, the Islamic society is built on cooperation and social responsibility. They feed for the love of Allah, the indigent, the orphan, and the captive. For 1,000 years in the Islamic civilization, education, health, and welfare were joint social responsibilities. There was no concept of paying for these. So this idea of the market society, that you have to pay for your education, you have to pay to get health services, this is an alien idea, a stranger to Islam. It's very peculiar that as long as, you see, it's basically a question of a heart, that all the children in Pakistan are my children. To take care of them is my responsibility. The hadith says that a believer cannot sleep with a full stomach when his neighbor is hungry. So the society as a whole must arrange to provide for social needs of the people. So one of the central attitudes that we need to change is what to do with excess wealth. Now the capitalist system says that put it in the bank and make, if you have a million that's extra, make more millions. This is again something laughable, ridiculous. Why? I mean, if I have enough for my needs and there are other people who need, then I should give, and I should give to those people who are in need. This again comes from distinguishing between needs and wants. So in a cooperative society where we are all brothers, the need for precautionary savings is reduced substantially. I don't need to worry about catastrophic event and save $1 million to help me in case I get cancer, because everyone will come to my aid if I am in need, and the social responsibility means that I will also go to their aid when they are in need. So this is the spirit of takaful versus spirit of insurance. In takaful, we take care of each other. In insurance, this is a private gamble between me and the insurance company. It's an adversarial contract in which if I win, they lose, and if they win, I lose. So actually, now this is not an easy thing to achieve. To illustrate this, we tried to do this in PIDE, and basically this is the same problem, that people are used to thinking in market terms. So if I offer a takaful contract, they say, okay, I have to pay this much premium, and my health needs are likely to be not that high, so I shouldn't do it. So if you sell takaful as an insurance, it will not work, because when you do the cost-benefit calculations, you will not succeed, you will not see the benefits, because it has to be a favorable contract to the company. But takaful is, I'm paying this money to take care of anyone who needs it. So if you frame the problem in this way, that in my organization, somebody or the other is going to be sick, and I should be taking care of them. When you frame it this way, then it makes sense, and then it can be implemented, but it requires thinking in a different way. So there are some institutional structures of cooperative and generous societies which are different from the institutional structures of capitalist societies. So in Islamic world, 1/3 of the land in the Ottoman Empire was devoted to waqf. So when people have more money than they can use, they spend it to build institutions to take care of others. In the capitalist society, people take money and put it in the banks. Now, this is not polar opposites. There are foundations for social welfare in capitalism as well, and there are places where you can store money in Islam. Well, it's just a question of emphasis. What is the main thing? Takaful versus insurance, we've already discussed. In the perfect competition, You see, we say that every firm is greedy and they are looking out for their interests. So how can we protect ourselves? We put a lot of firms and they compete with each other so that no one firm can rob us blind. Monopolies are very bad. Now, in the Islamic civilization, we had guilds. The guilds were driven not by the profit motivation. It was a monopoly, but it was driven by the idea of providing service. So once the issue is that the doctors as a whole are responsible to provide health service to the civilization, then the entire framework changes, and guilds which are work very efficiently and very well to provide the service, but if in a capitalist mode, they will be very harmful. So the real goal is spiritual progress. It is not getting the world. So if we work hard, if the whole world becomes better and we have all live in palaces and we have cars and luxuries and comforts, but the heart is the same, then we haven't achieved anything. The progress is by spiritual progress. So the stages are that they start with nafs ammara, which is exactly homo economicus. You pursue your desires. Then if you make spiritual progress, you achieve nafs al-lawwama, which is the self-blaming soul. So you are aware that if you cause harm to others, you feel it and you feel guilty about it and you try to change, and ultimately you can come to nafs al-mutmainnah, which is the highest stage. But this is not done in Islam by sitting in caves and contemplating. This is done by struggling with the world, trying to achieve justice, trying to fulfill your social responsibilities. So this is an entirely different paradigm. Change is driven by the heart and not by external circumstances, not FDI, and it's not building factories, and it's not doing all of the 20 steps that are recommended in the new Washington consensus. It is by working on the hearts. And so I'll end with one share, which is a verse from that. ये अक्ल वाले यूं ही हमेशा हमें फरेबे कमाल देंगे, जनू के दामन से फूल चुनकर खिरद के दामन में डाल देंगे. So it means that these people of the brains, that's referring to the West, I'm reinterpreting, the people with the brains will always deceive us. They will take the flowers and the fruit which are due to the passions, which real drivers, and attribute them. They will place these flowers at the feet of the altar of the goddess of reason. They will tell us that all of this has been achieved by logic and by science and by technology, whereas the driver is always the heart. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce our chief guest, Mr. Makhdum Khusro Bakhtyar, Minister for Planning, Development and Reforms. We have learned over time that he's a man of vision. So I would request him to come here and share his vision and insights with us. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dr. Asad Zaman, Zafar Hassan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. And I see a lot of galaxy of very eminent people sitting in this audience, which really humbles me as to how to articulate the economic vision which this country needs. And especially speaking after a very thought-provoking, alternate viewpoint on global economic structures by Dr. Asad Zaman and his Coca-Cola theory of happiness. And Coca-Cola today has $210 billion of market capitalization, which is around what? Little over 65% of our total size of GDP. And Coca-Cola, the CEOs based in Atlanta, are looking at Pakistan as a market where they can further increase their sales. Similarly, Pepsi. This is a true reflection of what the state of our structure of our economy is. It's driven by consumption. Today, our cumulative consumption is almost above 90%. In comparative terms, if you look at the region, India is little below 70, and Bangladesh is around the same figure. And our country is the 6th largest in population terms. So it's a huge market for consumer goods. And over the years, our investment has considerably, especially the private sector investment, has considerably shrunk. Today, our private investment as a percentage of GDP is under 10%. You couple it with public sector investment, then you come to a meager figure of 15%. So you have a 15% investment to GDP ratio, whereas your consumption is above 90%. What does it do? It continues to fuel import-led economy. And our fixation with dollar-rupee parity in the last 5 years has made imports cheaper and our exports expensive. That gives us the biggest challenge of current account deficit. So how do we go about it? Another structural serious challenge which we confront is our saving rates. Today our saving rate is 10% of our GDP. In India, it's 30%. So if you have savings, the banks would have that liquidity. That amount would go into further credit disbursement to different sectors of economy, and hence that economic growth, sustainable economic growth, which has been eluding us for almost 7 decades, would take place. Now, why these structural fundamental changes have not taken place? For a very simple reason: lack of political will. I was earlier in a TV, I would say a chat show. Just look at your neighborhood. We have an economy in China, almost the world's largest economy in 2025, growing on a sustainable growth of, come down a little bit, around 7%, 6, 7, 8%. India, another huge economy growing at above 8%. And we are struggling at 4%. The weighted average of our cumulative GDP growth over the years, over the decades, is around 4%. And if you couple it with your population growth, which is again the highest, and your gender participation in economy, So if we continue with this population growth and gender participation in economy, we will always be, for another 30 years or 40 years, a low-income country. So these are the serious fundamentals which stare us. If you look at our tax structures, again, all your social sector investments are a function of government's revenue collection. So your literacy rates, your health, clean drinking water, your preventive, your curative, health related investments, your GDP to tax ratio, again, is the lowest in the region. And within the tax collection, your direct and indirect tax balance is heavily skewed towards indirect taxation. And if you look at the scale of your economy as to what sectors, since the privatization of our banking sector, if you were to just profile the kind of which sectors have been getting most of the credit from top 5 commercial banks, you will see a very select segment or very few select sectors like cement, sugar, fertilizers, and even an average size of that credit allocation or that risk which a commercial bank takes is less than around, an average is around 5 billion. And in global economies with the growth trajectory, economies which are growing, 5 billion rupees is around what, $30 million? In evolved and developed economies, this is ranked in SME, small and medium enterprise kind of loan bandwidth. And then if you look at our demographics, the youth bulge, unemployment, the challenge which confronts us, as SME sector, I believe, is an area which has been neglected. I would say it's criminal negligence on behalf of policy makers and policy implementers. From 2006, it was around 17% of our total credit allocation to this sector. It's come down to 6-7%. And this is the sector which has the huge potential of addressing the challenge of unemployment, kick-starting job opportunities. So we are cognizant of these things. Similarly, another buzzword which goes around circle is ease of doing business. Though we have marginally improved on our ranks, but that is not sufficient. A holistic reform needs to take place. As I said, if you look at the growth trajectories of the largest economies in our neighborhood, and we are growing at 4%, it's like living in a shanty, towns between two skyscrapers. I would dare to say that restructuring and our economic growth has become a national security challenge. I have served in the Foreign Office. In the last previous government, I was also the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Assembly. Today, global foreign policy is driven by the strength of your economy. What synergies can you create with global economic partners? So now, why we have been shying away from doing this kind of structural reforms? The previous regime. Then again, we are a net importer of oil. Most of the oil comes in. Our energy, other fuel, either it's imported coal or LNG. So the countries which are importers of fuels for their energy needs usually have a lot of international price factors which impact their economy. In the last 5 years, there was a very good window, because the global oil prices had come down to $27 a barrel. So that inflationary impact which a high rate of energy or fuel has, that wasn't there. There was economic stabilization plan with the IMF. So the current account deficit which they inherited at 2 billion wasn't that threatening as to what we inherited at 19 billion. But the fixation with dollar-rupee parity and keeping inflation at the lowest and using their because see, any structural reform in this country needs a political will to spend that political capital. I can, without fear of contradiction, previous successive regimes had other agendas to fulfill in order where they would spend their political capital. And this government, the manifesto on which it was elected, was primarily reforms. What I'm talking about is not alien to most of informed sections of our society. They know where we are. I see a lot of young faces in the audience. They sit on the computer and they see what's happening globally. So that the vote which was given to this, the mandate which was given to this government, was primarily to restructure the fundamentals of this economy, to restructure the governance model of this country. There are two very important things. One is you can make policies, but implementation of that policy needs a very holistic, practical governance reform. No policy of the government can be implemented without a willing civil service. And if you see, there hasn't been any civil service reforms, meaningful civil service reforms. That's why sectors like energy, it's a very technical sectors now. That's why we are running a circular debt of over $1 trillion. Petroleum sector, a very specialized one. Science and technology. Just to give you a little window into the capacity of our human resource, if the environment is right, if the institutions are working, look at our defense establishment. The kind of indigenous growth of our defense requirements, which is done by scientists, by engineers from Pakistan. In fact, we are exporting a lot of our defense-related equipment globally. But you see a huge mismatch in the private sector. Private sector, we are not part of major global value chain. We are still caught up in producing low-end value products. And overall, the policies have been very much hostage to what they call an elite capture. That's why certain sectors, certain monopolies, certain oligopolies have always had this amazing synergy between the government policy makers, implementers, banks, and the businesses which are almost oligopolies. So we need to look at that holistically, open up other sectors. Another sector which merits a serious intention is our agriculture sector. Almost 24% of our GDP, and not contributing to the global value chain because of lack of investment in creating that that market chain which needs for our products to go globally. Another area is service sector. We today are almost 56-57% of our GDP is service sector. But our exports in service sector have decreased from a meager little over 6 billion to around 5 billion. Just look at our IT exports in the neighborhood, and where do we stand on ours? So, as I said, and our private sector really has to pull up their socks. I was in Karachi on Sunday. I didn't even know myself. We were interacting with Pakistan Stock Exchange, their main body, the captains of industry, and I didn't realize, I was informed the total number of people who invest in Pakistan Stock Exchange is 250,000 in the last 70 years, compared to India where there's 4 million. So even raising money from capital markets, the figures are in front of you. So this government is looking at on all these things. We have been, no government in the last 100 days have gone through such scrutiny, because that was the mandate. The people voted for this very change which badly merits Pakistan. So we have to address this export bias. We have to make painful decisions that will, in the short run, does fuel inflation. But just to give you an example of the difference between profit and profiteering, which really fuels the inflation which we see happening in last month or so. When the PVP government inherited an inflation rate of 14.1% in March 2008, and they took it to 21.5% in first 100 days. It means an increase of almost 7.4%. PMLN inherited an inflation rate of 5.1% in 2013, and they took it to 8.5% in first 100 days, and almost an increment of 3.4%. And PTI inherited an inflation rate of 5.8% in July 2018. 100 days, it's gone up to 6.8%, just 1%. And very, very cognizant that this is something which we need to address. So we are working on a very robust framework for poverty reduction, social security protection, and we'll have to have interventions, a policy of intervention to manage inflation of food items. So those are the interventions which we will be making. And in order to find that fiscal space for those interventions, we will be targeting the higher income population. We'll be targeting at a new tax structure, which would be totally skewed towards people who have those finances but not contributing to the tax base of Pakistan. Because no reform can take place if the lower strata of society is up and, goes into protest mode. You see what's happening in France. And that's why there are two-pronged strategy which we need to adopt. If we all in this room agree that the cumulative fundamentals of our economy merit a serious structural change, a good, robust economy will drive our foreign policy, and with the kind of population growth trajectory and the numbers we have, it's almost a national security issue. For that, people in this room, we need to make it part of public discourse. Though our democratic evolutionary process is not at that stage where the masses will be debating these issues. But we have to catalyze, bridge this gap of public awareness of what economy is, what it needs. Some reforms will be painful in the short term. But this cycle of 2-3 years of artificially sustained economic growth, and then you come down is practically playing snakes and ladders. So in that, I think our academia, media, economists, should be part of political discourse in the parliament, on TV. So really, we need to upgrade the level of discourse in society if we were to achieve these targets. So I would look forward to all your contribution in this direction. But we have huge opportunities also. When I say we are close to the world's largest economy, and we have an institutional framework of CPAC. Today, China's global imports are 1.8 trillion. And what are we exporting to China? Slightly over $1 billion. What are we importing from China? $18 billion worth. So my focus, because this ministry also coordinates CPAC, recently we have signed an agriculture framework agreement, socio-economic development agreement, and I'm going to China on 18th for the 8th JCC. My focus is industrial relocation, industrial growth. So hopefully we will be inking an industrial framework agreement. If we just manage, it's a win-win. See, when you talk of collaborative engagements between two countries and economies, it has to be a win-win for both. So we import 18 billion worth of goods from China. If we end up Chinese investment, some of that comes in those sectors to produce the same goods which we are importing locally. So it's a win-win for both. We are not exactly hurting the existing industry in Pakistan. At the same time, we are reducing our import bill. Similarly, today Vietnam exports have gone up to $200 billion. And we are at a meager 25 billion. This is primarily because of relocation of a lot of industry from China. So if we even go into this value addition mode, whereby you import 100% raw material, you do the value addition in Pakistan, and you export 100%. So this import substitution of industry, of those manufacturing sectors, we are doing a whole comprehensive mapping of which sectors, which industries, and we are devising a very robust investment incentive package around special economic zones. 4 or 5 years, this area has been of complete neglect. So hopefully, I'm very hopeful that in the coming first quarter of the next year, the first special economic zone will do the groundbreaking, and hence that will be the pilot project for this industrial relocation into Pakistan, the challenge of increasing our manufacturing base, which has shrunk as a percentage of GDP. So we have a huge potential. Similarly, we are very focused, because for any economic growth to take place, one huge major factor is the price of energy, availability of energy and the price of energy. So this management way of addressing the circular debt, revamping your distribution companies, looking at line losses, the mismatch between generation and transmission, having an integrated power policy, and going towards cheaper fuels, and mostly indigenous fuels, going towards renewables. So we are targeting a lower tariff of electricity, especially for business sector. So from Coca-Cola theory of happiness to some real stuff, I can assure you we are committed to make this structural reforms, because there's no other option available to Pakistan. And if it needs spending our political capital, we will spend that political capital, because we have been tasked to do so. वो शेर कहते हैं ना कि अवाम ने हमें वोट दिया है इस गुलशन के तहफ़्फ़ुज़ के लिए, तो इंशाअल्लाह हम ये करते रहेंगे. उसमें मैं all I would urge you कि please make economy as the centerpiece of public debate, and on that very foundation we will build these reforms. Thank you very much. I am again humbled by your to be addressing this very august gathering, and I look forward to more interactions with you in future. Thank you.
I would like to thank the panel and invite you down the deck to have a small souvenir ceremony. I would request Makhdum, Khusro Bakhtyar to please give souvenirs to the panelists. First, for Secretary Planning Commission, Mr. Zafar Hassan. Dr. Asad Zaman. Dr. Fazal Husain. It's a token of appreciation for all the efforts. I would now request Dr. Asad Zaman to present a souvenir to our chief guest, Makhdum Khusro Bakhtyar. That's all from Inaugural Session.